She meticulously cleaned the grand manor as if trying to erase her own presence within its walls. He, an unreachable millionaire, strode through the hallways with an air of urgent authority. But everything paused the instant the maid's daughter dashed towards him amidst a glittering gala and called him Daddy, for all to hear. And when he caught sight of that birthmark, an identical one to his own, on the little girl's arm, it was too late to keep up the pretense. The truth had undeniably pierced through the entire ballroom. The main hall of the Belmonte Foundation gleamed with golden splendor. Crystals hung from the ceiling like suspended starlight, and guests conversed in hushed, elegant tones. Camilla watched from a distance, balancing a tray of sparkling wine glasses, striving to blend into the background. It was then that, from the top of the grand staircase, a tiny figure shattered the decorum like a bolt of lightning. Lily, in a lilac dress and beaming smile, hurried down the steps, her shoes tapping like urgent bells. She ran directly to Arthur Belmonte, who was deep in conversation with ministers and investors, and wrapped her arms around his leg. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, her voice clear as crystal. A thick silence descended upon the hall. Arthur froze. His gaze fell to the girl's arm. And there it was, the very same inverted teardrop-shaped birthmark he had kept hidden since childhood. Camilla, standing at the kitchen entrance, felt her world crumble beneath her feet. Camilla Evans knew every corner of that mansion better than she knew herself. For 7 years, she had scrubbed the floors of someone else's luxury, folded linen sheets that would never be hers, and watched her daughter grow in the shadow of a secret no one could discover. She arrived at the Belmonte estate with a baby in her arms, and the vacant stare of someone who had lost everything. It was meant to be temporary, just until she found another place, but Mrs. Eleanor, as cold as fine china, permitted her to stay, provided she remained discreet, invisible. Arthur Belmonte never questioned it. He merely offered a distant nod on her first day, and from then on, he ignored her as if she were just another piece of furniture. Lily grew up inquisitive. At just 7 years old, she asked too many questions, smiled easily, and had a terrible habit of wanting to please Arthur. She called him Mr. Belmonte, drew his portraits, and left them on his desk, never receiving a response. "Mommy, does he not like me?" Camilla would bend down, gently adjusting her daughter's curls, and lie in the sweetest way she knew how. "He's just busy, honey. Important people are like that." But deep down, Camilla knew. She knew from the first time Arthur's eyes met Lily's, and he froze, noticing that teardrop-shaped birthmark, the same one he carried on his right wrist, inherited from his own father. She knew from the moment he averted his gaze, pressed his lips together, and never stayed in the same room as them for more than a minute again. In the silence of that house, Camilla heard echoes of another time, of when she still believed the promises Arthur made to her, late at night, when the mansion slept. He used to say he loved her, that everything would be different, and she believed him, until she discovered that when she became pregnant, he vanished. No calls, no answers. Just a check and a non-disclosure agreement sent by a family lawyer. She didn't accept it. She returned months later, broke, unsupported, and with her daughter in her arms. It was the only way she found to survive. And it was there, serving a gala dinner with trembling hands, that everything began to crumble once more. At night, after the mansion settled into silence, Camilla allowed herself to dream. In a notebook hidden among her clothes, she sketched what she called her escape. A small house, her own little shop, a room just for them. There, no one would ask about last names. No one would tell her to use the service entrance, and no one would pretend her daughter was invisible. She hoarded every penny in a cardboard box, tucked deep in the back of her closet, hidden even from herself. But every time she contemplated leaving, Lily would ask something that froze her in place. "Did he see my drawing?" Camilla, lacking the courage to admit she found the drawings in his office trash, always replied with forced hope, "I think so, my dear. I think he sees them." The week of the Belmonte Foundation's charity ball, Camilla was summoned by Eleanor. I want the entire staff visible." Her eyes lingered a moment too long on Lily, who was hiding behind her mother's skirt. "She's pretty, but perhaps it's best she stay in the back tonight. These events aren't for children." Camilla nodded, but Lily overheard. And that night, while guests toasted to the Belmonte patriarch's legacy, the little girl slipped away from the back with a folded paper in her hands. It was her best drawing, Arthur smiling beside her. She found him by the piano, surrounded by suited men and gleaming women. She lightly touched his jacket. "Mr. Arthur, I made this for you." He looked down, saw the drawing, saw the girl, and froze. Behind her, Camilla appeared in a panic. Arthur gave her a frigid glance, as if she were a living threat. "Get her out of here," he whispered, his voice strained. "No scenes." Camilla lowered her head. She felt the eyes of the elite pierce her like invisible daggers. The next day, the notice was blunt. She had until the end of the week to leave the mansion. No explanations, no right to defend herself, as if she were just another antique item in the house, expendable. Camilla didn't cry. She packed her bags in silence. She set aside only the essentials: clothes, a toothbrush, a few toys, and the old photo frame. Each fold was an unspoken farewell. And as she zipped up the last bag, she heard the question she feared most. "Are we leaving because of me?" She swallowed hard, looked at her daughter, and for the first time she couldn't lie. The following night was the conclusion of the charity ball, a more intimate dinner, only for the sponsors and the household staff. Camilla tried to keep Lily hidden in the back corridors, distracted with papers and crayons. But children possess a cruelly pure instinct for what cannot be said. When Camilla turned around, Lily was no longer there. Dressed in the same lilac dress she had worn for her last birthday, the little girl walked alone to the main hall, where Arthur was making a toast, surrounded by businessmen and famous faces. She approached in silence. And then, with the innocence of one who doesn't grasp the world's weight, she wrapped her arms around his leg and smiled. "Daddy!" The entire hall froze. The music abruptly ceased. Champagne flutes trembled in hands. A socialite let out a muffled, "My God!" Camilla entered the hall seconds later and stopped, paralyzed at the entrance. Arthur's gaze dropped to the girl's bare arm, exposed by her short sleeve. There, like a silent curse, was the teardrop-shaped birthmark. The same one he had carried since birth, discreetly hidden by watches and shirt cuffs. He said nothing for long seconds. Then his expression hardened. "What did you say?" The voice came out strained, dry. Lily, still smiling, repeated in a softer voice, as if sharing a precious secret, "You're my daddy. Mommy told me." A wave of murmurs spread like wildfire through the hall. Arthur took a step back. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice cutting. "Camilla, what did you tell her?" Camilla tried to respond, but shame, fear, and years of silence choked every word before it could emerge. She's just a child," she murmured in contained despair. "Take her out. Now." The phrase came out cold, like a sentence. Camilla walked to her daughter, took her hand, and led her away under the weight of dozens of gazes. The silence of the crowd was deafening. No words, no defense. In the kitchen, she knelt to be at Lily's height. But the girl didn't speak. She just looked at her, confused, with eyes that asked, "Did I do something wrong?" That night, Camilla couldn't sleep. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she watched her sleeping daughter, clutching her pillow as if it could protect her from a world she still didn't understand. It was then she heard slow footsteps in the kitchen. Mrs. Hilda, the oldest cook in the house, entered with a cup of tea and sat beside her. "He's a coward, Camilla, always has been." There was no hatred in her voice, only a sadness that time couldn't erase. Camilla nodded in silence. Her eyes were dry, but her chest ached as if something had fractured within. "Before, he was different." "They always are," Hilda said, "until something threatens their comfortable world." Camilla ran her hands over her face. "I should have left sooner." Hilda looked at her tenderly. "Perhaps, but now, maybe it's time not to go. Not to run anymore. Camilla didn't answer. That night, as her daughter slept, she stared at the dark ceiling and asked herself a question she had avoided for years. Why did her truth still need to hide? Have you ever had to swallow a truth just to protect someone? Have you ever pretended it didn't hurt, just to maintain peace? If this scene gave you a lump in your throat, leave a yes in the comments. I read every single one, and knowing you're here makes all the difference. The next morning, the sun lazily filtered through the window blinds, but inside the room, everything remained grey. Camilla lacked the strength to even get out of bed. She lay there, motionless, eyes open, listening to the sound of Lily's crayons scratching an old notebook. The girl drew in silence. For the first time, there were no questions, no smiles. Camilla felt the weight of something different in the air. It wasn't just the embarrassment of the night before. It was as if, within her daughter, a peace had shifted. An innocence had been broken, irrevocably. Lily closed the notebook and carefully climbed onto the bed. She sat beside her mother, resting her small head on her shoulder. "Are you mad at me?" she asked softly. Camilla took a moment to respond. She turned slowly, facing those eyes that seemed to hold a much larger question. "No, my love. Why would you think that?" "Because I said what you always tell me not to say. I just wanted him to know." Camilla squeezed her eyes shut. She felt her face flush. How could she explain that this silence wasn't Lily's fault, that the shame was never hers? Then came the question that shattered what little remained standing. "Mommy, are you ashamed of me?" It was like a knife through the center of her chest. Camilla pressed her eyes shut, bit her lips. Then she took a deep breath, pulled her daughter close, and answered with a choked voice, "I am proud of you, my daughter. You are the most beautiful and courageous part of me." Lily offered a small smile, but then she said something Camilla would never forget. "Then why do we keep hiding?" The words echoed within her like muffled thunder. She didn't know the answer. Or she did, but was afraid to face it. That night, while Lily slept, Camilla opened the drawer and pulled out an envelope. She took a deep breath and began to write a letter, not to Arthur, but to Eleanor Belmonte. Inside, there was no anger, only the truth and a single plea: don't punish her for being born. The next morning, before the first staff members came down for coffee, Camilla left the envelope on the dining table. She knew Eleanor Belmonte would see it. She spent the rest of the day waiting for some reaction, a glance, an order, a dismissal notice, but nothing came. That night, already in bed, she heard firm footsteps stop at the door of the servants' wing. It was Eleanor. She entered alone, without makeup, without heels, and for a moment, without armor. "I always knew there was something strange between you two." Camilla swallowed hard. She tried to answer, but Eleanor raised a hand, signaling for silence. "You don't need to explain anything else. Your letter said enough." She took a deep breath. "I just want to hear the truth this time, all of it." Camilla sat down slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice came out firm. She recounted the affair. About Arthur's promise that he would take care of everything, about the pregnancy, about his silence, and about her decision to return to the mansion, not for revenge, but for lack of any other option. Eleanor listened without interruption. When Camilla finished, she stood up, adjusted her coat and said, "He won't resolve this alone, but I'll make sure he stops hiding." That night, for the first time in 7 years, Camilla slept without the weight of guilt. There was still fear, yes, but now it was accompanied by something she hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. But if the previous silence had been painful, the exposure now was even more cruel. The following week, rumors began to circulate. Among the staff, the comment was always the same: "She's trying to get ahead. Now she'll want an inheritance." At school, Lily felt the impact. A teacher isolated her from a group. A father asked to remove his child from a paired project. No one said anything directly, but Camilla recognized the looks and knew what they meant. At home, bills began to pile up. She had refused the silent offer from Arthur's lawyer, money in exchange for an agreement that would deny any paternity. It was the same one she had received 7 years prior, and once again she refused. "Now it's not just for me," she told Mrs. Hilda one afternoon as she washed dishes. "I'm not going to teach my daughter to bow her head to lies." But it was hard. One afternoon, after being ignored by a colleague, Camilla escaped to the laundry room storage and broke down, alone, in silence. It was then she felt a small hand clasp hers. Lily was there, her eyes calm, her presence simple. "Are they mad at us?" Camilla looked at her with tenderness and pain. "No, my love, they're scared. People are afraid of what they don't understand." Lily leaned her head against her arm. "But you're not scared anymore, right?" Camilla took a moment to respond, but when she did, her voice for the first time came out without hesitation. "No, not anymore." The following week, Eleanor Belmonte called a meeting at the mansion. Only close family members were summoned. Siblings, in-laws, Arthur's children from his first marriage, no press, no outsiders, but enough so that the truth, if spoken, could no longer be retracted. Camilla learned of the gathering from Mrs. Hilda, and to her surprise, the invitation was also for her, and for Lily. That morning, she dressed her daughter with care. She calmly braided her hair, put on the little blue dress she liked so much. When the girl asked where they were going, Camilla answered with gentle firmness, "We're going to hear the truth, or we're going to tell it ourselves." The mansion's living room seemed smaller that day. Arthur stood by the fireplace, his shoulders rigid, his gaze fixed on the window. He greeted no one. Eleanor broke the silence. "There's something this family needs to hear, and Arthur himself will be the one to say it." All eyes turned to him. Arthur took a deep breath, but he didn't move. Camilla, standing beside Lily, felt her chest tighten. The humiliation of the party was still too fresh. Arthur glanced at his daughter, and then looked away again. It was then that Camilla stepped forward. "If you won't speak, then I will." The room froze. "I've worked in this house for almost 7 years. I was your shadow, and while everyone called me the maid, my daughter grew up invisible. But she isn't a mistake. She isn't a scandal. She is the result of a choice that only one of us had the courage to own." Camilla's eyes were tearful, but firm. She placed her hands on her daughter's shoulders. "I don't want money. I don't want a name on a document. I want my daughter to know she exists, that she has a name, an origin, and that her father is here, even if it took him too long to see her." Silence. Arthur finally moved. He took 2 steps forward. Then he knelt before Lily. She stared at him, motionless, as if she had been waiting for this for a long time. I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, "for every time I saw you and chose not to, for every silence, for every denial." Camilla watched him. There was no relief. Not yet, but there was something she had never seen in him, vulnerability. Arthur held his daughter's small hand. "I am your father, and if you'll let me, I want to try to be a part of your life." Lily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pulled a crumpled paper from her skirt pocket. Another drawing. "This is for you. You can keep this one if you want." Arthur took the paper with trembling hands. He looked at the drawing. It was him, holding her hand. In the room, no one said anything, but Eleanor exhaled slowly, and one of Arthur's older sons lowered his head, emotional. Camilla didn't cry, but something inside her finally found its release. The days that followed were strangely calm. At the mansion, the whispers gradually ceased. The house, once stifling, seemed to breathe differently. Camilla, weeks later, resigned. Not out of anger, but because it was time to leave by choice and not by rejection. She rented a simple little house in a nearby neighborhood. A small yard, a kitchen where Lily could play with flour without getting scolded, and a porch where time flowed more slowly. There, for the first time, they had something they never possessed, a place that was theirs. Arthur began to visit, sparingly, gently. He brought books, took drawings, sat on the floor with Lily as if relearning how to be human. Camilla never asked for anything, not public recognition, not alimony. She only wanted her daughter to grow up with the certainty that she wasn't born of a mistake, but of a choice that cost too much to continue being ignored. And Eleanor also changed. On her last visit, she brought a potted plant and said, with the sincerity of someone who had shed their pride, "She is part of our history, and I see that now." Camilla didn't respond with words. She merely nodded, because sometimes the greatest forgiveness is the silence that doesn't hurt. And the lesson Camilla learned is one that might speak directly to you. The truth can hurt, yes, but hiding it costs far more. Because while she remained silent, her daughter also learned to hide, and it was only when she decided to show herself to the world, with everything she was, without asking permission, that things began to shift. Because courage, sometimes, isn't in fighting, but in existing without apology. If this story touched you in some way, if at any point you felt a tightness in your chest, leave a like. It shows that stories like this still matter, and I want to get to know you better. Tell me in the comments, what city or country are you watching from? It's always exciting to know how far these stories reach. If you believe in the power of narratives that speak of pain, overcoming, and truth, subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started, and every new subscription gives me strength to continue. And don't leave yet. Choose one of the stories I left on screen. I'll see you in the next video.